24th gene key. Silence, the ultimate addiction. Programming partner, 44th gene key. Codon ring, the ring of life and death. 3, 20, 23, 24, 27, 42. Physiology, neocortex. Amino acid, leucine. The 24th shadow, addiction. The great genetic glitch. The 24th shadow, when correctly understood, explains much about the shadow state itself, as well as why human beings find it so difficult to resolve the deeper repetitive problems in their lives. This is the shadow that keeps the psychology profession in business, and it is the shadow that big advertising companies take full advantage of. We humans come pre-programmed for addiction, and the main culprit responsible for this is our minds. A well-known urban myth states that we only use a very small percentage of our brains, but any neuroscientist will tell you that this is untrue. In an average day, we use almost all of our brains. It is not how much of our brain we use, it is how efficiently we use it. As it stands today, the human brain is still such unexplored territory for consciousness. The way in which you use your brain is determined by your genetics, so that some people think more logically and others more laterally. Let's compare the circuitry of the brain to the 88 keys on a piano. We could say that the piano keys offer almost infinite potential for creating music and melody. However, in the case of our brains, we tend to find the tunes that we like and play them over and over. Many people don't really think for themselves at all, but have learned conditioned patterns from their parents and their environment, and keep following those patterns their whole lives. Of course, everyone uses their brain all the time, but it is relatively rare for someone to find an entirely new way of thinking. Synaptic routes within the ganglia of the brain become as trodden and familiar as public pathways, and the 24th shadow works hard to keep it that way. The mass consciousness of humanity is still dominated by the archaic fear and survival-based aspects of our brain. This fear is a powerfully pervasive force within the chemistry of the human body. The 24th shadow creates a low-frequency rhythm throughout your whole being, and this frequency prevents you from thinking outside your comfort zone, which exists on a physical, emotional, and mental level. We generally follow the same predictable paths in our external lives that our brains follow neurologically. This gives rise to the phenomenon known as addictive behavior. When we talk here of addiction, we are not talking about specific psychological disorders, but of an entire human behavioral code that is so self-limiting it does not recognize its own addiction. The fact is that all modes of thinking are addictive. You can be a left brain addict or a right brain addict, and you will be equally addicted. The only thing that breaks addictive thinking is silence, real silence. As we shall see, it is silence that gives birth to the 24th gift of invention, the art of thinking and acting in totally original ways. Every cycle of addiction has natural gaps within it, and human beings experience these gaps in awareness. They can occur at any time, and they confront you directly with your own suffering. At such times, you will generally feel a profound sense of emptiness that is deeply uncomfortable. Our general response to these gaps in awareness is to try to avoid them, either through numbing ourselves or distracting ourselves. The shadow of addiction ensures that people don't really change. Even though we may seek new ways of being, we usually end up following our addiction on the outside and never changing on the inside. You only have to look at a person's actions in the world to see whether they are living in a state of addiction or the higher state of invention. If they are influenced by the shadow state, there is always an anxious part of them that never seems to rest. Even though they may make cosmetic changes in their outer life, they never create anything substantially original. This pattern also tends to play out in their relationships, where they often find themselves repeatedly reliving the same scenarios without realizing why. Even if they change the outer relationship for one that promises to be completely different, the same tactics show up again, manifesting an inner neurological patterning that they seem unable to escape. It is important to understand the mechanics of the shadow of addiction in order to find the root of this deepest of human suffering. One way to enter into this mystery is using the model of the Corpus Christi mentioned in the 22nd gene key. The Corpus Christi refers to the 7 bodies, layers or sheaths of a human being. To really understand the mechanics of your suffering, you have to consider the 3 densest bodies and their relationship to each other: the physical, the astral, and the mental. The root of human suffering is wired into your DNA in the physical body, the very densest body of the 7. It is the primal sacred wound running throughout humanity, and its single purpose is to eventually trigger your awakening. The next body to the physical, in terms of vibration, is the astral body, out of which all your desires emerge: your sexuality, emotions, longings, cravings, and feelings. Whereas the physical body simply has essential needs, such as food and warmth, the astral has cravings which are inessential to survival. The primal wound is our perceived separation from the totality, and the astral body responds to this wound through desire. All desires are really rooted in a single desire: the desire to escape the suffering caused by the primal wound and return to the pure state of unity. If you could look deeply enough into this desire without acting on it, it would actually burn itself out, which is the underlying purpose of meditation. The next aspect of the story of your suffering is found in the mental body, the mind. Your mind reacts to the desires of the astral body and tries to think its way out of suffering. Addiction begins in the interaction of these 3 lower bodies. Your mind builds images, stories, and projections around the desires of the astral body, which set you on an addictive course of behavior aimed at relieving the suffering. Because the mind functions across time, its main tendency is to base hope of happiness on the future rather than accepting the real conditions of the present moment. The external civilization, designed by humanity, feeds the mind's strategy of trying to escape suffering and find happiness in the future. It is designed by the shadow, for the shadow, which is why it is so challenging to transcend the shadow consciousness in everyday life. Nothing external can bring an end to your suffering, since it is rooted deep within your DNA. Only when you turn inward and look for the source of your suffering will you finally face the addictive quality of your own mind. The programming partner of the 24th shadow is the 44th shadow of interference, which is responsible for the dysfunctional relationships that occur across our planet and which are the current norm. This dysfunction is the byproduct of a universal glitch in the genetic operating system of humanity and is reinforced by the 24th shadow. Addiction is the constant replaying of the same perceptive frame with no pause between frames, and this is what happens at a synaptic level within the brain chemistry of an average human. Like mice in spinning wheels, we simply reenact the same scenarios over and over without realizing what we are doing. The question then is, how do you escape the wheel of addiction and reset the program to run without the glitch? The full answer to this question lies within the 24th gift. But in a nutshell, the very realization that you are in an addictive pattern begins to shift the programming of the 24th shadow. Your willingness to confront your mind creates the necessary pause between the frames, allowing the mental body to disentangle itself from the astral body. When this happens, then for the first time, the astral body and its cravings are no longer fueled by the grasping of your mind, and you go much deeper into the source of your suffering. You purify the astral body through starving it of external stimulation, and thus you enter into the holy ground of pure desire, the desire to return to your true source. Repressive nature, frozen. When repressive natures come across a gap in their awareness, the fear inside them causes them to freeze up. This freezing can manifest in many ways. Physically, as a complete lack of energy, emotionally, as depression, and mentally, as a narrow-minded and guarded perception of reality. The secret to all addiction lies in how we respond to these gaps in the functioning of our awareness. The danger of addiction is that we seal our fate in these precious moments without realizing we are doing it. At the shadow frequency, we simply do not allow ourselves to experience the void that precedes a shift in awareness. The repressive nature shrinks from feeling that empty state of silence. If we were to face such times in our lives without either shrinking or reacting, something truly amazing would seed itself in us. Reactive nature, anxious. The reactive side of the 24th shadow, like the repressive side, is unwilling to fully experience their feelings of emptiness. This feeling of emptiness occurs to all human beings at different times in their lives. The gaps that open up before us can throw us into panic. If we react actively instead of passively, we do so out of anxiety. In order to escape the feeling of falling into a bottomless pit, we translate our fear into activity, and that activity obscures the potential magic that could have occurred inside us. Essentially, there are two kinds of addicts. There are those who numb themselves, the repressed nature, and those who stimulate themselves, the reactive nature. The reactive nature is more typically a workaholic or gambling type, as opposed to the repressive nature, which might exhibit an alcoholic type of addiction. These people who cannot sit still, but are flooded with the anxiety that comes from avoiding the powerful and absolutely natural chemical process that is taking place inside them. The 24th gift, invention, resting in the gap. In discussing the 24th shadow, we have examined the idea of being caught in a set of addictive behavioral patterns whose very nature conceals those patterns. Added to this, we have seen that such addictions can mutate into different patterns if the individual recognizes a gap between the repeating neurological pathways. Lasting from as little as a second to a week or more, these gaps actually occur spontaneously to everyone. Such gaps can allow an entire gestalt shift to take place in your life, and they can feel very destabilizing if you do not surrender fully to them. Your response to them determines whether they become bridges to another level of awareness, or you simply fall back into your familiar ways of thinking and acting. In the case of the 24th gift, the gap in awareness is fully embraced and therefore reveals its magic. People with this gift either catch themselves avoiding the gap or fully recognize such moments when they arrive. Either way, they do not cower before the fear that precedes these moments, and thus they discover that these gaps in awareness are not frightening at all. So what happens in the gap when you do embrace it? The answer is absolutely anything. The 24th gift is truly magical and contains the secret to genius. Genius is far more than lateral thinking. It is the ability to make quantum leaps. For example, The difference between a very good tennis player and a truly great tennis player is to be found in the 24th gift. The great player follows no set patterns that their opponent can break down, counteract, and defeat. They will throw in shots that are totally unexpected and come at the most intense moments. This is the gift of invention, of bringing new things into the world. The 24th gift is a birth canal for originality and surprises itself as much as others. The brain can be loosely divided into grey matter and white matter, the former being largely involved in the processing of information, and the latter in communicating that information. The 24th gift involves the mysterious processes that take place within the deep grey areas of the brain, and this gift seems to act as some kind of neural trigger that allows original thinking to emerge from these areas. The human act of pondering might be an apt description for what occurs through this gift. As you ponder a subject, you first travel familiar neurological pathways around that subject until you arrive at one of those magical gaps. The moment you hit a gap, it is as though you change neurological gear, and suddenly a new, more efficient network of synapses opens up in your brain. This allows you to suddenly see things in a totally new light. Ironically, as your brain becomes more efficient, you may well use less of it rather than more. If you can simplify the amount of neural firing in your brain, then ideas and insights may actually become sharper and clearer. The great joke may well be that the smaller the percentage of the brain you use, the more intelligent you become. One of the best ways of exploring the gaps is through the art of contemplation. Contemplation on the mysteries of life and death, on the nature of change and suffering, can lead you into sudden heightened states of awareness. To contemplate is to surrender yourself into the great mystery until it suddenly and unexpectedly reveals itself to you through a process of deep insight. Whether you can communicate your insight successfully is a matter for the 23rd gift, which, like the 24th gift, is a part of the genetic family known as the Ring of Life and Death. The Ring of Life and Death is a complex genetic codon group governing the many processes that bring human beings in and out of form. One of its major symbols is the wheel. It speaks of the mechanical processes that connect the wheeling of the constellations and galaxies to the rotation of the atomic structures deep within our bodies. It is all about those gaps between the cycles, the intervals between lives, the spaces between atoms, the silence between notes. Magic and mutation occur within those gaps. In human beings, this codon allows you to make quantum leaps in terms of the evolution of your awareness. The 24th gift is the heart of the human creative process. The secret of the 24th gift is really one of the secrets of creativity itself. It is, in fact, an acoustic field involving the raising of vibrational frequency through your genetics. Each time you hit one of these magical gaps, you have the opportunity to either shift up an octave in frequency or remain in the same loop. One of the truths about addiction is that it can be used creatively to elevate your frequency. Invention is really creative addiction. You simply experience a spontaneous rising of the frequency of the mind's tendency to think in circles. Addiction thinks in circles, whereas invention thinks in spirals. All the great insights that have driven human evolution, from the arts to the sciences, have come across the bridge of the 24th gift. Only one who is willing to face their own ignorance can cross this bridge. It begins with your willingness to admit that you do not know and that you may never know. This inner honesty creates the environment for invention to occur, even though when it may occur cannot be predicted. It usually occurs when you are at rest, manifesting the gap in some external way yourself, sitting silently, sleeping, dreaming, or simply doing nothing at all. The 24th Siddhi, silence, exiting the wheel. The 24th Siddhi is a challenging Siddhi to write about, because how do you describe silence? Obviously, you cannot. What you can do is consider the manifestations of this Siddhi and build a context around it. Thus far, we have looked at the nature of addiction and how it can be elevated or transformed into creative invention. We have discussed the way that the brain follows patterns and how these patterns can mutate into newer, more efficient and more original patterns. When we come to the Siddhic level, we really have to put away the mind altogether. Silence is the natural background state of all human awareness, and silence can only occur when thinking ceases entirely. Over the centuries, human beings have tried all manner of techniques to stop the mind from thinking. Thinking can in fact be masked by certain techniques, but that temporary quietness is not the same as the pure silence of the 24th Siddhi. The silence of the 24th Siddhi is a silence that descends on you, even though it already lives inside you. It occurs as a result of the shift in the inner geography of human awareness. True silence reigns when the mechanism controlling your awareness moves from your head down into your solar plexus. You cannot say that silence is experienced because silence invokes the paradox of there no longer being an experiencer to have an experience. Silence negates everything, fusing together both subject and object. For awareness to shift in this way, some kind of physical mutation has to occur within the human body. Certain chemicals must be created by the endocrine system that prevent the process of normal acoustic thinking. You no longer think, but are thought by life. This is not something that can be described. At the Siddhic level, there is no longer thinking, but there is both knowing and not knowing simultaneously. Not knowing is there when awareness is at rest, and knowing is there when awareness engages in some form of communication with the outside world. Both expressions really amount to the same thing. When the mind ceases to think, then all addictive behavior also ceases. The ultimate addiction of believing yourself to be separate from life is eradicated. In this sense, silence does not necessarily denote physical silence. The silence of this Siddhi is an internal silence that is permanently engaged. Just as addiction can be transformed through natural gaps in the functioning of awareness, so the Siddhic state exponentially expands this gap. Awareness itself is shown to be a veil that obscures the true nature of these gaps, which are really windows into the nature of pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is silence, or emptiness. It is represented temporally as the time before the beginning of the world. Only true inner silence can bring an end to the maya or illusion of your separateness. It is this silence that lies between and behind the activity of your thoughts that systems of meditation attempt to induce. The 24th Siddhi has other surprises too. The ancient Chinese sages named this 24th hexagram of the I Ching returning, a name with many interpretations and implications. We have already seen how the constantly revolving nature of this gene key is played out. It is rather like watching a film reel going round and round over the same series of frames until, at the gift level, a new set of frames is spliced in before the revolution continues. The circular movement of life returns to the gap of silence, that magical place where evolution and mutation occur. This is the silence between the words of life, or the gaps between the atoms that we have already mentioned, the so-called elusive dark matter of modern physics. In terms of human destiny, Our sages have ever sought to explain this returning movement at a metaphysical level, and it has given rise to many of the great mystical theories, two of the most enduring being that of karma and reincarnation. Of particular relevance to this siddhi is the entire doctrine of reincarnation. The sages have long spoken of the greater destiny of the human soul as it incarnates into the world of form, lives out its karmic cycle, and then reincarnates again and again until such time as it transcends form altogether. It is as though human beings have a kind of cosmic addiction to form itself, and until this addiction is broken once and for all, humanity can never be truly free. At this final stage in which the connection with material form is ruptured, the soul is said to become enlightened and returns to the ocean of being, or Godhead. It is easy to see how such doctrines have emerged from the way in which the human mind interprets life through this 24th gene key. In the postmodern age, the West has picked up this primarily Oriental idea of reincarnation and adopted it as a mainstream New Age dogma. Most of the better-known contemporary teachers and gurus speak openly about the fact of reincarnation. Indeed, it is discussed in some considerable depth through the 22nd gene key. However, as the 24th siddhi bears witness, reincarnation is simply one interpretation of a much simpler truth, and from the point of view of this siddhi, at least, it is nothing but an illusion. Despite what the teachers may say, most people like the idea of reincarnation because it gives them the sense that there is something about themselves they can hang on to after death. It gives us a sense of continuity and justice underlying all creation. From the point of view of the 24th siddhi, however, reincarnation is simply another human concept born out of the language of the Maya itself. This theme is explored in some depth in the 44th siddhi, which is the programming partner of this 24th siddhi. Both these siddhis strip the human story down to its purest and simplest form, in which human beings are viewed quite coolly as simply genetic equipment for consciousness to play in. When one piece of equipment dies, it is gone, but it played a part in writing a great transcendent script. Even though the equipment has died, the play must go on, as the saying goes. Therefore, what appears to keep returning to the world of form actually never leaves. Bodies are born and die, and their specific awareness functioning dies with them, but the overall consciousness beneath continues. It is silent, undying, intangible, and beyond form. Thus, when you identify with or remember a past life or even a future life, you are simply reading the information within your fractal line. It is contained within your blood, but no aspect of me survives death except the silence of consciousness itself. How can there be anything other than silence when true silence negates awareness? There is indeed relative truth within the concept of reincarnation and its culmination in enlightenment. However, the whole attempt to identify with continuity of awareness is a watered-down truth. The only thing that really reincarnates is silence itself. In the 22nd gene key, you can hear all about reincarnation, the gradual enlightenment of the various subtle bodies as they incarnate into form, move through the bardo states in between lives, and then return again. You can also learn about the causal body, that subtle layer of your being that survives death to carry the essence of your evolution on into the next life. But the causal body is seen as an illusion at a certain point in the process, and as it dissolves or shatters, so your enlightenment dawns. At this point, reincarnation ends as you find that gap in the great wheel and exit the whole drama permanently. All these wonderful descriptions are in fact part of the script of our celestial drama, and their real purpose is to help settle your mind and give it a sense of logical continuity. Nevertheless, stay cognizant of the nature of the vast paradox that hits you at the Siddhic level. All such descriptions are essentially devices within the Maya that may or may not help you to relax within the Maya. The key is always to relax, because only as you relax can you find the magic gaps and experience the truth directly. Not through your mind, but through your innermost being. Within the flowing story of the gene keys, the 24th siddhi is the great trigger for the enlightenment experience. At a certain point in the evolution of every genetic and karmic fractal line, a certain piece of genetic equipment comes into the world that represents the culmination of that line, and as it explodes into its full blossoming, it brings an end to a whole mythic aspect of the human story. As more and more of these people are born, the overall story of humanity will slowly come to an end. When all the stories have been told, all that will remain will be the silence that was there all along, in those magical gaps between the atoms, the notes, the words, and the lives of all human beings.